Hello. I'm going to talk to you today about literary research, which we can think of as the activity of examining literature, which is why we call it literary, to find information or opinions that we can use to support our point in an essay or some other form of writing. To do this research, a writer begins by looking for sources, the written works that quotations come from. In this lecture, I'll discuss some ways to find those sources that you can use in your writing as you work on projects in classes like this. So, as an example, I'm going to try to learn more about one of my favorite writers, T.S. Eliot, a poet from the early 20th century. Ordinarily, I'd start this research in a physical library, such as this one, which we can think of as, the big building where they keep all the books. This is mainly because I'm fairly old, and when I started doing literary research, physical libraries were the only option. More practically, though, for this class, I think I'm going to do my research online. And because I have access to an institution's library, I'm going to start there. So I'm going to start at the Coastline College online or virtual library. Now, the easiest way to get to the Coastline Library is to just go there directly, which you can do by typing coastline.edu/library into your favorite search engine. Here I'm using Chrome. You can also use Mozilla. If you like, you can use Internet Explorer, but hardly anyone does. And of course hitting enter. And here we are at the Coastline College Online Library. In this library, there are a couple of ways to search for information on subjects that you're interested in. The easiest way, of course, is to just go to the library catalog search, which works in the same way that search engines you may be familiar with work. You would simply type your subject into the text box here. T.S. Eliot, let's remember, is my subject, and press search. And after waiting a few minutes, because the internet is what it is, you can see a list of the books that our virtual library contains on the subject of T.S. Eliot. And as you can see, there are many. However, for this project I'm working on, which is the same project that you're working on, I don't really think I have time to read an entire book. Instead, I'd rather look for smaller pieces of information of the kind I can find in an encyclopedia. And so, instead of going right through the search engine here, I'm going to instead go to eBooks and Databases. And in eBooks and Databases, I will scroll down a little bit and notice that there are many subjects that I could look for my particular subject in this list. But I want to use an encyclopedia because for this project, I just need a little piece of information. I just need a fact that I think will be interesting and help explain what my interest in T.S. Eliot is. And so I click on Encyclopedias and Dictionaries, and I really like the Encyclopedia Britannica. So I can click on that. And it looks like I'm going to have to sign in to get access. Fortunately, I can do that. I have a username, I have a password, and I know how to press this login button. So I'll do that. Sadly, my password has changed since I was here last, so I have to input my new password. And like magic, we reach the Britannica academic homepage. And again, we use the same kind of protocol we use with any search engine. We simply type our subject, T.S. Eliot, into the search engine box, and we get recommended articles. So that looks like a good link to click on. I will click on it. And here is Britannica's article about T.S. Eliot. As you can see, this is still some reading, but it's not as long as an entire book, and I can find, if I need to, a fact that particularly gets my attention. Might be interesting to me that T.S. Eliot was probably the most erudite poet of his time in the English language. That's successful literary research right there. I have a quotation that I can use in a paper. And later in the course, we'll talk more about how to use quotations and how to incorporate them into work. Right now, we're still talking about finding sources. So, our college library is a good resource for finding sources in, and these encyclopedias are particularly good for small works like a paragraph in a class. It's also possible to use the internet outside Coastline Community College, and probably you've heard of a method of research known as Google. Now, Google is quite useful in many ways. By using Google, one can easily find a lot of resources for any particular subject you might care to think of. As I look up T.S. Eliot, I see lots of publications about him. As I was doing research earlier, I found this one especially interesting. T.S. Eliot, the poet who conquered the world 50 years on. Probably I'm going to read more about that later. And do the same thing I did with the Encyclopedia Britannica. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to see if there is a sentence or a fact that really gets my attention, and I'm going to probably quote that sentence in my paragraph. I just wanted to point out that Google exists, as you probably know, and that Google has some particular shortcomings academically. The problem with Google is that it lists all of the things published about a particular subject, and not all of the things on the internet are necessarily credible. Remember that anyone can post something on a website. Well, anyone with a computer, at any rate. And so you're not assured that you're getting competent information or an expert opinion when you just look at any old site on the internet. There are ways to distinguish credible sites from less credible sites, and we will talk about those in a later class. But for the time being, I just want to say that Google is useful, but at sometimes doubtful. As you're noticing here, there is a final source that can be very useful in research, and that is the source called Wikipedia. Let's take a look at that now. So again, here's a Wikipedia site about T.S. Eliot, my favorite author, the author I'm trying to get facts about. And what I want to say about Wikipedia is that it has many of the same shortcomings as Google or the rest of the internet. One of the strengths of Wikipedia is that anyone can add information to an entry. And one of the weaknesses of Wikipedia is that anyone can add information to an entry. Wikipedia is edited, but not always carefully and always by mere humans who can't make sure that everything is always correct. So it's always a good idea to take Wikipedia with a little bit of caution. However, as we scroll down to the bottom of this Wikipedia entry, we will notice that Wikipedia also includes links to direct experience of the subject, in this case works by T.S. Eliot, but also it has footnotes, which we can follow to get more information. We can use Wikipedia, in other words, to get more sources, to go deeper into the literary research that we're doing. T.S. Eliot's a big subject, as you notice, so he's got a lot of footnotes. Also, most Wikipedia entries include a further reading section where you can look at other works about the subject that you're researching. And again, what I'm saying is that Wikipedia is an excellent source of sources. As a primary source of information, again, it is somewhat doubtful, and I would suggest caution, but it's really useful for doing future research, for doing further research. And so those are the four sources for literary research that I want to bring to your attention. The physical library, the virtual library, such as Coastline College's library, Google, and Wikipedia. I hope that this has given you a useful example of how to start doing literary research. As you take more classes, you'll do a lot of it, and you can also apply it to many other areas of your life. The skills that you develop as you do more literary research are skills that you can use in many areas, professionally and academically. And of course, as always, thank you for your time and attention.